Okay, it's good to see everyone. Just a few more seconds here, and then we'll get going with the conference. We'll kick it off. A lot of familiar names and faces out there. Good to see everybody. All right, I have 12:02, so I guess I'll get us started. So welcome everyone. It's good to see everybody. Good morning, those of you that are in the West. It just turned into afternoon on the East Coast, 12:02. Welcome to the 2026 Association for Environmental Studies and Sciences annual conference. It's virtual this year, and welcome aboard. It is wonderful to see so many names and faces out there, familiar people, and many that I don't know that are joining for the first time. And I think whether you are a longtime member of AESS or a student presenting for your first conference paper, or a practitioner looking for new ideas and collaborations, thank you for being here. This is it's great to get together. As we gather at this conference, we're celebrating another year at AESS. For nearly 2 decades, this organization has served as a home for scholars, educators, students, and practitioners committed to understanding and addressing environmental challenges through interdisciplinary work. As I conclude my term as president, I find myself especially appreciative of the community that has been built here, and I'm really excited about the future that lies ahead. This year's conference theme is Facing What Is, Environmental Truths and Collective Response, and it really could not be more timely. Environmental studies and sciences have always required us to confront difficult realities. We examine climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, environmental injustice, and the many interconnected challenges that arise from the relationship between human societies and the natural world. Our work asks us to face facts as they are, not as how we wish them to be. But the second half of this theme is equally important, collective response. Environmental challenges are not simply scientific problems. They are social, cultural, political, ethical, and economic challenges. Addressing them requires collaboration across disciplines, institutions, communities, and economic sectors. It requires exactly the kind of interdisciplinary engagement that has always been the hallmark of AESS. One of the things that I value most about this organization is that we have never been satisfied with producing just knowledge in the academic sense, right? We've always sought to connect knowledge with action, scholarship with practice, and research kind of within the communities that we serve. That spirit is reflected throughout this conference. Over the next 2 days, we will hear from researchers, educators, students, practitioners, and community leaders who are wrestling with difficult questions while also exploring pathways forward. As I reflect on my time as president of AESS, I'm struck by how much this organization has accomplished through that same spirit of kind of collective action. Tomorrow during the business meeting, I will have the opportunity to share many of these accomplishments in more detail, but I'd like to just briefly acknowledge some of the highlights here for everyone. This past year, AESS continued developing a 2025 to 2030 strategic plan, trying to help chart the course for the next 5 years for this organization. We hosted our first ever pedagogical retreat down at Camp Beckwith in Alabama, which brought together faculty from across the country and has already generated numerous collaborations in both teaching and research, many of which are being presented here at this conference. And it was also wonderful because it happened at a time in February where it was in single digits in northern New York, and I got 2 days of 65-degree sunshine in Alabama that was very much needed. We continued our student symposium program in the spring, which now over 4 years, I believe it is, has had 128 students present posters virtually, which is growing to be a really great opportunity for students to present their research in a more formal kind of virtual environment. And of course, we've gathered here for our virtual conference this year at the annual conference. I also need to mention that none of this happens without an extraordinary group of volunteers and leaders. A special thanks has to go out to our Managing Director, Carolyn Anton. Carolyn is the steady hand behind so much of what ACE accomplishes. And without her dedication, organization, and commitment, very little of what we do would be possible. So virtual thank you to Carolyn. I also want to recognize our conference committee, Val Roundtree, Chelsea Peters, and Kat Owens, whose hard work and countless hours of planning made this conference possible. Please join me in thanking them, along with all the board, committee chairs, and reviewers, and volunteers who help make the ACE such a vibrant community. It's a lot of work to put a conference on, whether it's virtual or in person. So a lot of thanks to that crew as well. I also want to extend an invitation. Tomorrow at 10:45 a.m., we will hold a business meeting, which isn't the most exciting of titles, but it is an important one, and it's open to the public. Anybody, so if you have colleagues, most of you that are on this are registrants for the conference, or all of you. But if you have colleagues, anybody that is curious about what ACE does, and you say, hey, they couldn't necessarily make the conference, send them a link. They can log in and go to the ACE business meeting, and it's a great opportunity because there'll be brief remarks from me, but then all the committees present what they've done over the year, and it's kind of a good opportunity just to see what we do here at ACE throughout the year, and to get to meet the people that are leading the organization. So that's my invitation to have those colleagues that are curious about ACE join us tomorrow, even if they can't make the rest of it. This conference is also meaningful for me because it's the conclusion of my term as president. I will transition, I think officially tomorrow at the business meeting, into the role of past president. And serving as president has been a great honor for me. I have really the privilege of working with an extraordinary board of directors, committee chairs, volunteers, students, and members. What continually impresses me about this group is the generosity of the community. People give their time, their energy, their creativity, and it is a very positive environment to work. And so thank you all so much for allowing me to serve this past year. It's been really an honor. I'm equally excited about the future of ACE and the leadership that will guide us forward. Tomorrow at the business meeting, we'll discuss our next steps and formally welcome our incoming president, Brian Kite-Kirby, and I know the organization will be in very good hands. Today, however, I have the pleasure of introducing someone whose career embodies the very themes of this conference. Several years ago, ACE awarded our plenary speaker the William Freudenberg Lifetime Achievement Award. In her acceptance remarks, she challenged all of us to move beyond awareness towards action. She reminded us that environmental progress depends on finding common ground across differences. And she urged us to engage those who are not already at the table, to broaden our conversations and build more inclusive pathways towards change. Those ideas resonate powerfully with this year's theme. Facing what is requires honesty. Collective response requires action. Facing what is requires acknowledging our differences, and collective responses require building common ground. Facing what is requires recognizing whose voices are absent. Collective response requires bringing those voices into the conversation. Few people have embodied those principles more consistently throughout their career than our plenary speaker. Dr. Patricia DeMarco, Patty, career defies easy categorization. Okay, trained as a geneticist, she has built a remarkable career spanning science, public policy, higher education, energy regulation, environmental advocacy, and public service. Okay, she has served as a policy advisor, a utility executive, environmental regulator, university scholar, center director, elected official, author, and public intellectual. Along the way, she has consistently worked at the intersection of science, policy, and community engagement, helping translate complex environmental challenges into practical pathways for action. Many know Patty through her leadership in carrying forward the legacy of Rachel Carson. As executive director of Rachel Carson's Homestead Association and later director of the Rachel Carson Institute, she helped bring Carson's message to new generations of students, scholars, policymakers, and citizens. She has been equally comfortable in the classroom, the community, the halls of government, in the public square, always asking how environmental knowledge can be translated into meaningful change. Most recently, she brought that same commitment to public service to elected office, serving as the mayor of Forest Hills, Pennsylvania. Her career stands as a powerful reminder that environmental studies and sciences are at their best when they connect disciplines, bridge divides, and inspire us for collective action. So with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Patricia DeMarco.
Thank you so much, Dave. That's very generous of you. I'm an old lady. I've had time to see the changes that have brought all of us into such a state of distress these days. But I look at the path that I've traveled since being in this space since 1975, and I realize we have been in worse places before, and we can make a future that we can all believe in. So if you could put up the slides, I'm not going to burden you with a lot of data because all of you probably know this better than I do. But I wanted to speak a little bit about facing what is, and what is right now is that science is under attack at all levels, and that has serious implications not only for public policy, but for the way we teach and the way we go forward in our lives. We are looking, next slide, please. We're looking at the environmental truths, which is that, no, next slide. Next slide. Thank you. We're looking at our life support system, which is fueled by the sun, clean water, fertile ground, fresh air, and the biodiversity of species. Next slide. All of these are under attack right now, but we have to understand we're not alone. And I will give you this from Rachel Carson. Man does not live apart from the world. We live in the midst of a complex dynamic interplay of physical, chemical, and biological forces. And between us and our environment are continuing and never-ending interactions. Next slide. This is the truth that we have to face. The life support system that we depend on is under stress from the industrialization of our way of life, fossil fuel combustion, resource extraction, hyperconsumption as a lifestyle and goal, and also the increasing pressure of population. Next slide, please. And we are now facing a series of existential crises, even though these are currently being diminished in the public federal reports and climate is considered in denial. The reality of the situation is quite dire, and these are data from the IPCC sixth report. Global warming, global pollution, and loss of ecosystems are really at the heart of the truths that we cope with on a daily basis as environmental scientists and as policymakers. Next slide. We have to mount a collective response against a very vigorous, gleeful attack, revoking 31 environmental regulations, putting a great deal of pressure on eliminating science as a base for public policy. Next slide. These things are the reality that we face, but the laws of nature are not negotiable. Climate change is happening now. It's a consequence of human actions, and our laws have to change to enable and promote a sustainable economy. I think the United Nations Environmental Program Director Achim Steiner said it the best. American policy is looking backward to a world that no longer exists. We have to be the voice calling out the truth that that reality of our federal policy is a reality that no longer exists. Next slide. And having the courage to reclaim the narrative, I think, is where we need to focus our attention, because there is a wonderful narrative to be had, and we are the ones who can articulate it and convey it to the public in ways that make sense. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I start, of course, with Rachel Carson's words, because in her time, before we had a great deal of regulation, she saw a reality that we're facing as well. that mankind has gone very far into an artificial world of his own creation. He has sought to insulate himself with steel and concrete from the realities of earth and water. Perhaps he is intoxicated with his own power as he goes further and further into experiments for the destruction of himself and his world. It could have been written today. Next slide, please. But we are not facing a technology problem. We know what it takes to make this U-turn from the projections of a future of 4 degrees or higher warming and to get into a range that can be sustained. We're facing an ethical problem and a problem of moral commitment, not a problem of technology. Next slide. And this moral responsibility as scientists is what calls to us the most strongly in these times. And again, I go to Rachel Carson because she has the perspective of seeing a world where she saw the need for controls on the industrial processes at a time when very few others were willing to state that. The underlying all of these problems of introducing contamination into our world is the question of moral responsibility, not only to our own generation, but to those of the future. We're properly concerned for the health of those now alive, but the threat is infinitely greater to generations unborn, to those who have no voice in the decisions we make today, and that fact alone makes our responsibility a heavy one. If you've never read Rachel Carson's essay on the pollution of our environment, it's easily found in Lost Woods, the discovered writing of Rachel Carson. It is one of the most prophetic pieces of prose I have ever read, and I would recommend it to you and recommend it to your students. It isn't long, but it was one of the last speeches she gave in public, and it really calls us to the center of the discussion. As scientists and as educators, it's our responsibility to speak for those whose lives are affected by decisions being made today that they have no voice in. Next slide. So we are really in a place to articulate a new vision for a shared prosperity. And I get tired of hearing people talk about a just transition or transitions. We are way past a transition type of time frame. We're needing to talk about a transformation from a fossil-fueled civilization based on extractive industries and destructive use of resources to a sustainable civilization that's based on regenerative practices using renewable and sustainable resources, replacing what we destroyed and trying to regenerate the living earth that is our life support system. Next slide. So if you look at where we are today, economic factors really drive the decision-making process. As Mr. Selden has declared in their regulation of the EPA, they will no longer consider anything but economic impact on the industry. Public health considerations for environmental regulation have been taken off the table by this administration, and that has persisted through a number of other decision-making centers all the way through the federal and state and local government, even into corporate matters. The economy is the driver, and things like the well-being of the environment, the well-being of society, the culture, the history, the things that make us human are really diminished in consideration if they're considered at all. Our job is to reintegrate those significant parts of our total so that they're in balance. Not that you ignore the economy, not that you take on things that are completely uneconomic or unfeasible, but that we balance the need for our humanity to consider the cultural and historical history, the environmental sustenance that we require in order to survive on this earth. And that is going to require a reclaiming of the narrative and a re-engaging with the public policy process with all of the passion and facts that we can muster. Next slide. And I think one of the ways I found hope in all of this is to revisit the work of Donella Meadows in The Limits to Growth. Her perspective was really very enlightening, that people don't need enormous cars, they need respect. They don't need a closet full of clothes. They need to feel attractive and they need excitement, variety, and beauty. People need identity, community, challenge, acknowledgement, love, and joy. These are things you get from each other, from community, from people working together in common purpose, from people feeling valued, from people feeling respect and dignity from their fellow creatures. These are the things that have been eroded so seriously in our economy. And having them replaced by just drive for material wealth, for the symbols and trappings of success, really just gives you a lot of people that are frustrated and beholden to mortgages they can't afford. Next slide. So, what I take hope from also is that the solutions are growing in impact and in scale. Regenerative agriculture to restore fertile ground also captures carbon and now integrated with agrivoltaics on many, many levels and scales, even in Fairbanks, Alaska. This kind of work, I think, really begins to show the power of the distributed renewable energy system that can replace the destructive systems that we've endured for the last 100 years. Energy systems that are now partnered with domestically produced, non-rare metal based long duration storage batteries like the EOS Energy battery made in Pittsburgh. It's a zinc based battery. These kinds of things are now cheaper than natural gas, and they're gaining popularity and gaining penetration all across the world. And also the whole concept of circular materials management by design, making things that are designed to be recycled, that are designed to be reclaimed and reused, rather than being designed to be made into trash as rapidly as possible. And to look at things that invest in the local economy, where the investment makes local jobs with local money located in the area where the project is located. The entire initiative of reinvesting in disinvested communities has been derailed in this administration, but the projects that went forward under that initiative have been very successful and have really contributed to the rebirth of many communities that have been abandoned and forgotten. Next slide. So I want to give you a few insights on building coalitions from the hard won places like Clairton, PA, where we're fighting the addition of a hot strip mill in a place that's already heavily polluted. This is the picture on the left. On your left is the um, community meeting that we held in advance of the Nippon U.S. Steel merger, trying to think about what the implications of that would be for our community. Next slide, please. One of the biggest messages that ACE can carry with great credibility and success is to connect environment and health in the minds of the public. Human rights and the environment are interdependent, and that you need to have a clean and sustainable environment for the full enjoyment of all of the range of human rights. And you have to explain the connections between climate and everyday experiences in a way that people can relate to. Right now, food insecurity is growing across our country, and we're having disruptions of the normal agricultural systems, especially the large-scale monoculture-based ones, from drought, from unexpected flooding at wrong times of year, from all kinds of disruptions. And of course, the prices of groceries are rising because of that. People don't make the connection with climate change and food prices. They don't make the connection between food scarcity and climate conditions around the world. We can explain these things to people in ways that make sense and also encourage them to do things like community gardens, like locally supporting their agriculture in their own communities and finding ways to become more resilient. Next slide. Also, there are 124 million Americans living at the fence line of about 12,500 high-risk chemical facilities, including power plants, fracking sites. 39% of the U.S. population is affected. And if you live within 3 miles of such facilities, their health risks are much higher than they are for the population at large. You certainly have one or more of these communities in range of your university. These are the people who need you. These are the people who need a voice and who need the science and the understanding that you can help bring to the situations they're facing. I will put in the chat at some point the petrochemical lunch and learn that we did with the Black Appalachia Coalition in 23 and 2024 and 2025. We did a series of health harms of petrochemical facilities with lived experience demonstrations, and we did a toolkit. It's welcome. You're welcome, all of you, to use it. Very helpful in just explaining the situation to people so they understand what they're experiencing. Next slide, please. So the other thing we can do is use our campuses as teaching tools. The people have trouble visualizing, moving toward what they cannot visualize. And if you can help people to experience a sustainable building, a living building, a renewable energy, system, to see what agrivoltaics looks like in their own space so that it isn't unfamiliar and it's something that they can aspire to, it won't become so space age crazy, and it won't be so unfamiliar. This is a picture of the Phipps Sustainable Landscapes building, which was made from reclaimed materials. All of the boardroom tables in that building were made from the few large trees that had to be felled to build that space. It is a campus of living buildings. There are now 9 buildings on that campus that are living building standard. And we have had a tremendous amount of success in using this space as a teaching tool for the public who comes through with signage, interpretation, and just experiencing what it feels like to be in a net zero building. As we reach for more supportive national laws, and looking at investment in renewables and infrastructure, having that way to visualize success by experience is so important because lawmakers in particular, they're very skeptical and they're listening to all the garbage. You need to show them, no, you can be in a net zero building in the wintertime and it isn't cold and freezing. It's wonderful. And this is the proof. So you need to give them a way to use your campus as a teaching tool. Next slide. And then to be the source of credibility to preserve the conditions for life to exist. We cannot legislate the laws of chemistry and physics or the biological system responses to changes in the environment, and we have to adjust our laws to be in harmony with nature. But most of your legislators who are coping with budgets and with curtailment of resources and looking for ways to, they don't understand the science. I had the unfortunate experience of having to explain capillary action to my local senator, and he was about to be ruling on fracking. And I explained to him that, you can put it down under the ground and they'll tell you it's 3,000 feet underground. How can it harm anything? Capillary action moves all of those materials you put there through the rock in time. It will diffuse. It doesn't stay where you put it. And he absolutely paled. Literally, he went pale and his eyes opened because it hadn't occurred to him. And he understood what capillary action was, but he hadn't ever connected it to the fact that fracking does that. Make those connections. If you have data centers going in your community, explain to people what happens to the water table. Explain to people what happens to the heat islands. You need to make those connections between the science and the lived experience of the communities they're in because they don't always get it and they may not make that connection. They may not know. You are the source of the credible information because you're university professors. You have the standing to do that. Next slide. So the evidence of healing the land and empowering the people is really powerful. I think taking the touchstone of beauty of the earth as a source of strength is really an important and a very powerful motivator and a very powerful force. The Greenbelt movement of Kenya made changes in that river valley that were sufficient to see from a satellite, just from women planting native trees. And now we have the Allegheny Land Trust in Pittsburgh preserving community farms so that they can't be taken over when the developer nearby decides that that land would be better with a building, making community gardens something that can be protected by title and ownership. These kinds of things help because they empower people to connect back to the natural world. Next slide. And, Wangari Maathai was a very eloquent and very wise lady, and I would encourage you to read her work. if you haven't already, that you can't protect the environment unless you empower people, you inform them, you help them understand that these resources are their own and that they must protect them. If we can connect people to the fact that the natural world around them is their life support and is the reason that they're able to live on this planet, you have an easier time getting them to understand why the regulatory process is necessary. Next slide. And to focus on life at the fence line, the poor and the minority communities among us need advocates. Many times there have been generational experiences of suffering, as there is in Clairton, 5 generations of people living under that steel mill. The people who work there don't live there anymore. They don't walk to work anymore the way they did when everyone was on shift and walked down to the mills. The only people who live in the shadow of those plants are the people who can't afford to leave. And they are more often poor and more often in worse physical health. But they are a wonderful laboratory for people to come with your students and help to identify what are the problems these families are coping with and how can we change the policies to help improve their lives. Next slide. And healing the land also is, if you look at reimagineappalachia.org, I'll put that in the chat too. We were in the process of opposing the fracking plans that were the plastic plants that were planned all along the Ohio River Valley. And so we conferred with the people in those communities, especially in the coal mine communities. And we said to them, if you were given a $6 billion investment incentive, what would you do in this space? None of them said they would build a plastic plant. And in fact, the one that was built is now up for sale and isn't working properly. But what they did suggest was a whole array of things that included using the skills that they used to mine to repair the long high walls, the damaged lands that have been left behind, especially those that were damaged and left before 1977 for the Mine Reclamation Act. So this kind of thing gives you a way to empower the people. If you ask people what they would rather be doing and what kind of development they would like to see before you start writing grant applications and writing, policies that come from above and look down, you find amazing wealth of ideas and of commitment to change that is very, very powerful. And I find this a very productive place to bring your students to facilitate these discussions, to engage in community development at the ground root level, and to help people articulate their own needs and find the resources to fill them. It's a wonderful experience for all concerned, and it really does build very lasting coalitions. Next slide. And to be clear, the sustainable options are often cast aside because it's too expensive. They don't work. It won't work here. They have 20 million reasons why you don't want to be considering these kinds of things. The biggest reason is the gas and oil companies don't like it. Well, they're becoming more and more and more, attenuated, I think, in their desperation, because the reality is that even unsubsidized, and if you look at the dark bars, these are the unsubsidized cost of wind with storage, solar at utility scale, and solar with storage. They're below everything. Nuclear is highly subsidized. If it's not subsidized, it's over here. The subsidized cost of coal and the subsidized cost of gas, you have all higher than these renewable resources at an unsubsidized level. So understand that some of the incentives for our fossil industries have been in the law since the 1800s. And it's time to update our system to recognize the future instead of preserving the past. Next slide. The other thing that works is to illustrate the reality of savings, whether you do it on your campus or in your community. We built a net zero energy borough building. And when I put up this slide, this is the 2022, this is 3 years after the building was in place. In March, we still had a 3,485 credit from the prior summer. That was in March. In April, we began making more than we use again. So after using the credit down all winter, we still had almost $3,000 left from the prior year. And the bill due was zero. We now have 5 buildings in our borough out of 8 that are on this kind of a system with solar on the roof. And we're meeting, on paper, we're meeting 100% of our electricity load. The way the tariffs are written, we can't net meter everything under 1 meter, and that's another story for another day. But the long and the short of it is, if you put something like this in a way that you can show the public, they lose their opposition to solar pretty fast. Since when don't you like zero? It's a very powerful argument. Even the fire department, when they saw the bill, like this bill, they wanted to put solar on the fire department, and they had been resisting before. So this is the kind of thing that you can help do. Translate things into simple visual expressions of positive results. Next slide. And this is a very recent project that I got involved with. Um, the Congress of Neighboring Communities is all of the communities surrounding Pittsburgh, and the Southwestern Pennsylvania Co-Hub, which is a broader regional organization of municipal people who focus on municipal policy problems together. We decided that many of the problems that municipalities come forward with would benefit from having a university class involved in solving them. So we brought together faculty researchers, especially capstone classes, where the students have to do a project for their capstone class. Instead of sitting around thinking them up, we went to the municipalities and asked them, what kinds of problems are you facing that we can help solve by involving or dedicating a class of university students for a semester? And some of some of these projects are simple tasks like building a business directory or a GIS map or an inventory of assets. Others are studies that involve multiple communities, like collaboration on a complete streets process or collaborating on a watershed protection. And others go for more than one semester, and a class will take on a project under a professor, like the Clareton Air Quality Airshed work. So we've had all 3 ranges, and we've done 10 projects this year. And it brought the academic expertise in the universities into the communities in real time with real interfaces between students and community leaders and community people. And the result is that many of these students become engaged in the actual real world science. They have to look at the implications for budgets and the feasibility of implementation in the face of building codes and zoning ordinances. And it also engages the citizens in the conversation because as they're explaining to the students what their needs are, they are enlightened a bit and understand the value of bringing research to bear on public policy problem. It has been a tremendous success, and we're going to be writing more about this under Connect, and I look forward to sharing it with you because I think anywhere where you have a community in need in the area of your university, the opportunity to engage your students in real world problems exists and is really an abundant place and a very rich and fertile area for both teaching and also for public policy. Next slide. You also can convene community academic conversations. As scientists and as environmental advocates, we understand the interconnectedness of things, and to be able to convene conversations around these complex problems by bringing different areas of expertise together and the different stakeholders together to have conversations of exploration. I'll give you a few examples. One, the Pitt Center for Sustainable Business under Chris Gasman. They have done a lot of work on the microgrid and electricity space and on the reshaping of our energy system around a more renewable and sustainable initiative. And they brought together the people who are doing advanced fuel cells, long duration storage batteries. They bring the utilities into the conversation and start looking at those places where the impediments by policy can be relieved by a collaborative effort. It's been very productive. The work of Arlene Bloom at the Green Science Policy Institute in Stanford has had a tremendous input into public policy on forever chemicals. Very successful, very focused, but also a tremendous resource for anyone who is coping with these kinds of issues wherever they are. It has had a major impact on federal legislation as well because of the sustained effort of this group. The Ohio River Basin Alliance, out of the University of Louisville as the major supporter, has finally taken on cleaning up the Ohio River all the way up into its tributaries. And this has been a massive undertaking. They're convening last, I guess it was September at the University of Pittsburgh, brought together all the different people from the watershed to talk about doing what they've been doing in other watersheds for years, looking at combining industry controls with government controls with citizen awareness. This is a very important and very powerful tool that academics have because you can gather the stakeholders without prejudice. You can convene a neutral ground where people can come together and find solutions from having a conversation facilitated in an academic environment. Very, very powerful, tool to convene under the authority of your dean, of your faculty member. These kinds of things work for food security issues. All kinds of things can come from them, and your imagination is your only limit in how you can apply these. Next slide. So I also find that empowering your students is the most important thing you can do. Introducing your students to the public policy process really is the best tool you have for influencing the future and for giving us a sound foundation for our future leaders. Because of the advance of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, I started doing my class not with having them write case studies and write analyses 5 times a semester. I gave them policy problems and assigned the dramatis personae, and they could use whatever methods they wanted to research it, but we had to act it out in the class. So we had public hearings on land use policy. We had Senate committee hearings on legislative proposals. We had a town council meeting on fracking. I gave them assignments and they had to research the positions of the dramatis personae. I'm the labor guy, you're the business owner, you're the resident, you're the housewife, you're a high school teacher. And depending on how many students you have as many stakeholders as you want. It was very effective. And I've had students come to me and say that I got a job as an intern in a senator's office because I knew what a public hearing was about. I could, and I've had people come up to me when we were doing the community benefit plans for EOS Energy. A student came running across the room that I'd had in 2012, and she now works for the Department of Energy. So you never know where your students are going to end up. You have to give them the tools to be strong advocates. Next slide. And we have an obligation to our children. We teach because we care, and the classroom is not your boundary, but your platform. And science is not political by definition, in spite of best efforts to make it political. If you teach students and the public the difference between validated facts and unsubstantiated opinions, you have done a tremendous service to the future of our country, the future of our world. And it's a tough job, but it's really important. So I give you the Woodland Hills High School class of 2019. This is the awesome climate action team. They did a climate symposium, which is now in its 5th year. They had to expand it to the David Lawrence Convention Center, and it has become a leadership training forum for the high schools all around the city. This class of kids, watch them. Future president among these kids. They're amazing. And I was very honored. They took a petition to the school board and demanded a climate plan for the school district, which they've been limping through with, all due diligence and no budget. But this class of kids really got it. And I think our high school students are really deserving of much more attention than we usually give them. Next slide, please. And finally, I would urge you to follow Rachel Carson's advice that it's not time to be silent. This is the time to raise your voice. And if it's, against your principles, and if it's policy that you know is wrong, or behaviors that you know are illegal or unfair, this is not the time to sit there and wring your hands and be quiet. It's the time to speak up. Not in my name, not in my name. So remember that we have to look on, we cannot look on and do nothing. We are the ones who know about what is coming to us if we don't act. And we are the ones who have the power to shape the future that we want, not the future that will be thrust upon us by lack of objection. So I end there, and I thank you so much for your attention. Next slide, please. I encourage you to obtain any more information you want from my webpage, patriciademarco.com. You'll find the climate toolkit there, and also Reimagine Appalachia, which is a very wonderful compilation of the blueprint that was done from listening to the coal miners. So happy for your questions.
Well, thank you so much. I'll applaud here. There's a lot of applause going up virtually on the screen there. Thank you so much. Those were wonderful remarks and a great way to kick off the conference here. We have about 7 or so minutes to take some questions. So I might start with one that Rob put into the chat, kind of zooming out, thinking about the country politically in the direction of the Democratic Party. He says that Democrats are rethinking kind of their support for oil and gas in somewhat of a concerning way for those of us that are thinking about the environment. We were just kind of wondering, a few people here are just wondering what your thoughts are on that and where that may go. And this kind of shift for the Democratic Party and what it might mean for all of us.
Well, I don't want to get into the politics of a particular party, but I know in commenting on the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan, which is up for public hearings these last few weeks, their biggest emissions control target was shifting from coal to natural gas. And when they presented that part of the presentation, I basically put my head down on the table. And the lady who was presenting said to me, "Sorry, Patty, that's just reality." And I pounded my hands on the table and I stood up and I said, "That is only reality if you allow it to be reality. Natural gas is still a fossil fuel. And if we aren't even making a plan that admits that we must stop burning fossil fuels, then we have doomed the next generation." And I said it, with a lot more passion and rage than that. But basically, we can't take it. We can't sit by and say, "Oh, well, now it isn't done until it's done." And I can tell you that in my Democratic Party discussions, they're all wondering, how do we get young people involved? There's so many young voters who we aren't addressing their biggest concern. If you talk to the young people of any stripe, they know by the time we grow up, it's too late. Why should we even bother participating? We're going to have a good time while we can because the world isn't going to be here when I grow up. That is not the future we want for our children. We have to listen to them. We have to speak to them. And we have to give voice to their concerns because they can't vote yet. So what I say back to the Democratic Party, and I am on the Democratic Committee, and I say this all the time, and they go, "Oh, Patty, that isn't reality." The reality is we lose elections when we lie. And you can't pretend anymore that climate change isn't real. You can't pretend anymore that it isn't happening now to us today. And if we continue to persist with policies that pretend otherwise, we will continue to lose, and we will continue to have disasters fall upon us, like Mr. Zeldin in the EPA. I wrote a blog about rewriting the National Environmental Protection Act according to the precautionary principle. And because rescinding the rescissions is not going to be a solution, being
Right.
against everything that just happened isn't a solution. You have to present a positive vision of a better future, a finer future, one that is a shared prosperity, one that has hope and life. If we're not doing that, we will continue to lose elections. And I won with 97% of the vote in my town, Republicans, Democrats, otherwise, because I don't mince words and I don't pretend. And I'm 80 years old and I shouldn't be running for office, but you lead where you're called. So I think speaking truth to power is what you all can do and all must do if we're going to survive.
Well, thank you for that answer. Those are inspirational words, and I appreciate your candor. The next question we had dealt with data centers, and I'm curious whether you've been answering any questions in your own community about data centers. The question is really about like what can local citizens kind of do to get involved in this issue. There were comments about, some communities have moratoriums, but moratoriums can end, right? And then what happens after the moratorium's over, right? How do communities think about if it's coming, what they can get from it, in terms of benefits for the local population or the community in general? Yeah, so kind of a broad question there about data
Okay,
centers.
this
Yeah.
is something where I would urge you to do some convenings. There's a lot of resources available on this subject now, and the main thing to do is to ask questions before people get to the stage of filing for permits. If you can do something with your zoning in advance to say, we want to protect our water supply, we want to protect our power grid, we want to protect our citizens from noise and traffic and pollution, you need to get that into your zoning ordinances before you have an application because you can't do it retroactively. The other thing to do is to ask the questions, you know, go to the public meetings and make it clear that, okay, what are you going to be doing for a water supply? And what does that do for the rest of us who are using well water, especially communities with well water? And just ask the questions. There are a lot of resources available on that. There's a coalition in Pennsylvania that's doing statewide organizing around this, and I'm sure that's true in other places. How many of these things do we need? And what are their implications for the power grid? If you require them to bring their own power supply, does that mean they're just going to plunk down a gas turbine and call it done? And what does that do to the grid when they have to go on to the standby? All of these things have to come up before you ever put a shovel in the ground. And it's an ideal time and place for universities to convene good public conversations about this and publicly do it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We maybe have one more a quick question, and then I'll have just offer some closing remarks. George wrote in here that Trump has destroyed the federal government, but before we all know but before that, we all know our federal systems were never perfect. What are like one or two things you would do differently when we get someone in office who kind of wants to govern again?
Okay, first thing I would do is to focus on things that actually reinvest in communities rather than enrich corporations. And if you look at some of the things that happened under the Inflation Reduction Act early on that were not able to be rescinded under the Congressional Review Act, you'll find some wonderful examples of community reinvestment projects that have done amazing things in communities like West Virginia and Kentucky, uh, Ohio, Illinois. A lot of them are in Republican states because their economic development apparatus was a lot more streamlined. But investing in communities builds jobs. Investing in giving corporate tax breaks enriches corporations and it never trickles down. We all know this. We've always known this. But lifting up those examples and codifying that kind of thing into our processes. Secondly, I would re-examine our regulatory infrastructure. The regulatory infrastructure, especially for distributed power, is woefully out of date and totally inadequate to two-way traffic on the grid. It's designed for one-way traffic on the grid, and it isn't working. It's falling apart left, right, and sideways. And this is not going to get solved one PUC at a time. We need a National Energy Act that actually works for a future that we actually can see. And those are the two things I think I would take on. I could go on for quite a while on the subject, as you know. Do look at my blog because I write about this a lot.
Yeah, and well, thank you so much. So we probably have to shift now, but I want to give one more round of applause and thank you to Mayor and Dr. DeMarco.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a joy to see all of you, and I'm just thrilled that your organization is thriving. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those were great words and great remarks to kind of kick off our annual meeting. Thank you. Really appreciate them. You know, as we were reminded there, the challenges we face are significant, but so is to our collective capacity to respond. Right? We always have to keep that in mind. That is one of the things I love most about ACE, is that we don't stop at identifying those problems. Right, we bring together people from different disciplines, institutions, and communities to kind of explore those solutions. And that work continues this afternoon, right, as we transition to our sessions. Our concurrent sessions will begin at 1 o'clock, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of the incredible range of scholarship, teaching, innovations. The strength of this conference has always been in the communication in between sessions and things like that. It's a little bit more limited as a virtual, but I encourage you all to participate actively in the chats, please, during your sessions, and really enjoy these the talks in the various formats that we have. So again, thank you again, Mayor DeMarco, Dr. DeMarco, for your talks, and look forward to seeing everybody in our sessions at 1 o'clock. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye. God bless you.